Okay, so a quick update. I don't know where I left off. Anyway, floor's all the way in, tabbed it in, covered up a bunch, added a second layer to most of this bit of core over the sponson. I think I showed you this already. Front section of floor's in, put a couple bulkheads in, both sides, and then the smaller one over here at the back. The idea behind the short one is that I can still put a ski, like a slalom ski, in here as storage, and it'll sit on top of that and not end up back inside the boat. And over here, I went to my local jet boat builder, Mini Jet Inc., wicked dudes, and he sold me some offcut Kusa for far less than it was going to cost me to buy a whole sheet, so I could cut some strips off it. And we're basically just starting to glue up the flanges that will support the deck, or the hatch that's going on the rear deck. And then back here, while I'm waiting for other things to happen, we're going to start the little bit of body work that I've found that I have to do. Had some spider cracking here. I sanded through the boat here. And then you saw my kind of white trash way to get my transom in. So these are all the screw holes from when I screwed the transom in. Anyway, we've just ground them below flush, or below level. We'll throw a bit of chop strand mat at them just with poly, so it's faster and easier. Sand it smooth, block it out, and hopefully sometime in the next couple weeks I can flip this boat over. Okay, so here I am. We basically just have a bunch of scrap chop strand mat sitting on the bench there, and we're just mixing up a bit of polyester resin at a time. I don't know, like 300 milliliters or so, and we're just tearing up pieces of chop strand mat using some cheap chip brushes off Amazon, and we're just adding a few layers of chop strand mat to all the mess that I made on the back of the boat. It all gets sanded flat and ferried out later. Okay, so I should have time lapsed, but I didn't. I got the boat flipped over, had a buddy come help me. Wasn't really that big of a deal. It's pretty high in the air right now, so I'll have to do something about that. I'll throw some still pictures in here, but I weighed it, and we're about 640 pounds on the bare hull. So I'm quite happy about that. I've heard these things weigh from 8 to 1,200 pounds, 800 to 1,200 pounds. So being sub 700 has been pretty excited. So here we are, we're working on the pad mod. We're basically adding about 3/4 of an inch to the pad in the center so that the center pad is lower than the outer sponsons, and it should be similar to STV dimensions. Apparently it frees the boat up a lot, and you don't sacrifice a whole lot in terms of handling. You can also see that I'm a moron, and I've pieced together the last bit of my vacuum bag. Yeah, long story short, I'm stupid, and I cut a bag when I shouldn't have. And here we are. So yesterday I didn't show it, but I basically just bagged down this Kusa. It's 1/2 inch Kusa. Mixed up some thickened epoxy, bagged it down in place, and I've cut the material we're gonna go with 3 layers of 17-ounce biax on top. And then because the boat's a little crooked, I'm gonna stack one more layer on this half of the pad. So when I go to blueprint it, less body work, or less filler work, sorry. So bag set up, materials are cut. Just gotta wet it out, throw it on here, and get the bag going. So I'll set the camera up and put it on time lapse again, and away we go. Okay, so here we are, just getting ready to glass down this piece of Kusa board. So pre-wet the Kusa out like I was the balsa, then wetting out my biax cloth, and then we kind of put it on there, roll the air out of it. You'll see I end up with a little air pocket at the front. Some debris got in there. I didn't peel it apart. I just let the vacuum bag deal with that. And then you're going to see that I put the peel ply on and then put bleeder right on top of it instead of putting some release cloth or release film in there. In hindsight, I should have put the release film in there. It would have been much easier to take the breather or the bleeder off at the end, but can't go back and change that now, can we? So this bag went well, even though I kind of pieced it together out of the last few feet of my bagging material. So next are just a few pictures from some of the bodywork I did. Because everything was epoxy, I can't use poly or vinyl ester based fillers. So I used micro balloons and the Rocca epoxy that I had and made my own body filler. And then this is just sanding it back out using a big straight edge over the outer sponsons to check heights. Everything was actually pretty close. Maybe out by 1/8 of an inch before I started this work, so there wasn't a whole ton to do, thankfully. And then from here, I mentioned some spider cracks in the front of the boat, so I just ground them out a little bit. Got some chop strand mat over top of it all, and started flattening it back out. Body filled it. I was able to use like 3M below the waterline filler on this because it's all poly. So anywhere that had body work done, whether it was vinyl ester or epoxy based filler, I then sprayed it with some primer sealer before switching to the black base paint, which was a Rival gloss black. It's made by Exalta, the same company that makes Imron. So you'll see kind of spraying it in what appears to be a weird sequence. So I sprayed the insides of the tunnels and the center sponson with 2 coats with fairly short flash time before I started working on the outer sponsons, for a couple reasons. The main one being I don't want to lean over the boat that far and risk dragging my sleeve or something across the outer sponson, which will be the most visible part of the boat. And secondly, I'm not metal flaking the inside of the boat. I'm just kind of doing the outside of the outer sponsons. So we got 2 good coats of black on the outer sponsons, almost 3 really. I just kind of used up what was left in the cup, because then I was transitioning to metal flake and clear after that. So instead of wasting it, I just kind of threw it on the bottom of the boat. Here we are. I'm spraying metal flake. What I did that you don't usually see is I sprayed the metal flake directly into the base coat before I switched to clear. Quite often metal flake, goes directly into clear. This is trying to avoid as much buildup as I can. So I used a dry flake gun from Roth Metal Flakes, I believe. And the flake is actually from Tropical Glitz. The colors I used were Overcast, which is a dark gray, and then I put just a tiny bit of Bikini Bottom, which is kind of like a teal color that I mixed in a small percentage just to drag it into the bottom, because the top of the boat's going to have a bunch of that color in it. So once I was happy with my metal flake coverage, I then proceeded to put another 3 to 4 coats of just clear on top to get the flake buried, because it's going to have to sit for a few days, get sanded, and then top coated again. So I probably should have been wearing a Tyvek suit, but as long as I remembered to open the window on the shop, the fans were actually doing a pretty good job of keeping the fumes out. Unfortunately, it's cold in Canada at this time. Like, I don't know, it's probably 10 or 15 degrees below zero, so I can only let so much air flow through the shop at once. Well, I'm no painter. I've got a couple runs and sags to deal with, but bottom of the AE is sprayed out. Black Imron, and then Overcast with just a touch of bikini bottom teal are the two flake colors I used from Tropical Glitz. So we'll let this sit for 4 days or so, and then cut it, and then hit it with another 1 or 2 coats. Here you're going to see my good sag. Yep, right there. I want to say it looks worse in the video than it does in person, but we'll see. Maybe that's just where the bow numbers will go. So like I mentioned, I was going to have to sand the orange peel out of the boat. So I protected the high points with some masking tape and then used 400 grit and 600 grit sandpaper to cut the orange peel out. I had some nibs and, like I said, a couple sags, so I cleaned those up as best I could. Got everything sanded out, cleaned up, and then you can see that I taped the center sponson and the tunnels of the boat because I didn't need to. I didn't need to sand that out because I didn't metal flake it. First coat. Kind of see where it was still. Second coat of clear. Pulled the tape and the masking off immediately, hoping that the edges will roll over and I don't have to do anything about it after. We'll see. I mean, I'm not going to do anything about it, I don't care. We did a little bit of work on the sag. Here it's far less noticeable. Good enough. So here I just used my blue box to spray out a test panel for the metal flake I'm going to use on the deck. And then we're going to move into a couple short clips of me weighing the boat when I went to flip it over, just between a couple engine hoists. So it worked out to be about 640 pounds. The Nita core is definitely cutting a bunch of weight. I mean, the floor that I put in the center, that was about a 50-pound weight savings compared to plywood alone. That's about it for this video. In the next video, we'll start painting the deck.